Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to welcome all of you to the third panel of day 2 of the 7th Abuظبي Strategic Debate, in which we continue to discuss the issue of the peace agreement between Israel on the one hand and UAE and Bahrain on another, and their impact on creating a different Middle East. Since the first half of the 20th century, the region has seen a number of shifts that gave it its current shape, notably the eruption of the Arab-Israeli conflict and all other wars associated with it. Then came the hesitant peace between Israel and some Arab parties, as well as a stumbling peace process with the Palestinians. All these shifts and shocks that the region has witnessed call on all stakeholders to change their approaches. These approaches should be based on political rationality, away from delusions in understanding reality, away and on calculations of interest. Unfortunately, many elites in the region still insist on facing new challenges and threats by old-fashioned approaches and strategies which eventually lead to a stalemate in the region. This has led to the continuation of struggle that created a situation that is very much like an addiction to conflict. The Abraham Accord is a brave and rational breakthrough in the state collective delusions in the region. This accord will face more challenges ahead that require a rational understanding and interpretation so that the two parties to it can ensure its success and set a practical and successful model for others. Participants in this panel include some prominent officials and diplomats who contributed to the making of this historical breakthrough of the Abraham Accord. Those include Ambassador برايان, who is a special advisor to President of the United States for the Abraham Accords. Ambassador Alon, Oshfiz, who is the Director General of Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and His Excellency Ambassador Khalifa Shaheen Al-Marar, who is currently the Assistant Minister for Political Affairs at UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. I would like to welcome the speakers and thank them for accepting our invitation to take part in the debate and this panel in particular. I would also like to welcome all our viewers who are watching this panel on EPC's account on all various social media platforms, as well as on its YouTube channel and via Zoom application. Before I give the floor to the speakers, I would like to draw the attention of our Arab viewers that they can listen to simultaneous interpretation in Arabic by clicking on the French channel at the bottom of the screen of Zoom. Now I would directly enter to the Q&A with my prominent speakers. And I would address this to the three speakers. I will start with Ambassador Haq. Ambassador Haq, how can the Abraham Accords be a catalyst for Middle Eastern countries and societies to move from collective delusions into political rationality?
That's a very good question and a very fitting question to begin this conversation with some good friends here. So you talked about shared interests, and I think that's something which President Trump focused on very early in his presidency. He made his first trip as president overseas to the Middle East, and I was on that trip. He went to Riyadh, then he went to Israel, and then he went to the Vatican. And on that speech that he gave in Riyadh, he set forth a vision that was based on shared interests. And that really has been the basis, I think, of his diplomacy and the diplomacy of the two secretaries of state that I've worked for, but especially Jared Kushner. He was always very optimistic about the potential for the region. And Jared, I would say, came to this with a fresh set of eyes. There are a lot of people who've come to the Middle East, especially from the United States, who've written scores of books on the Middle East, and they think that they know better than the people who live in the Middle East about what the future looks like. And they often impose their vision on the Middle East as opposed to listening. And so Jared definitely did a lot more listening than talking. And it was very clear, especially in countries like UAE, that this was, and especially in the Gulf, this is a region that is tired of these old conflicts. And they don't, especially the young people in the Middle East, they don't want their future to be buried by the past. And they are much more tolerant, and they're very innovative, and they're young. And they don't understand why some of these Arab countries would fight 3 wars with Israel since 1947. And it's been the cause of so much suffering and bloodshed. And so while there has been a very clear concern for the Palestinian people, that's something that we expressed in our vision for peace that was released earlier this year. We also were not going to let the past continue to be an obstacle towards progress. And those countries that are stuck in these tired old grievances, countries like Iran that exploit division, these are the countries that are losing influence in the Middle East. And the countries that practice tolerance, like UAE, Bahrain, others, that invest in their own people, that invest in the future, that want to partner with countries like Israel that have so much to offer, that's the future. And in those countries where you have a high level of Iranian interference, you have the opposite of that. You have sectarian violence and the same old tired arguments of the past that have held back people for so long. Then you look in the Gulf, in places, all these countries around the Gulf, we're very optimistic. And you talked about whether this is a catalyst. It's already happened. We had UAE go first, then we had Bahrain, now we've had Sudan and East Africa. And as more countries normalize with Israel, it is going to open more doors around the region on the basis of economics, defense cooperation, technology, health, diplomacy, culture. These things in the aggregate are going to help minimize the Arab-Israeli conflict. And what I said, I remember in the Oval Office with the president, after we did the phone call with the King of Bahrain and with the Prime Minister of Israel, I said that historians will remember these 2 peace agreements as the beginning of the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Absolutely. Superb. Ambassador Allen, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Doctor, for having me. And Sheikh Khalifa, it's good to see you once again. And Brian, on a personal note, I have to say that I miss you very much.
You as well.
So it's good to see you. Let me start, Doctor, by saying that a very short while ago, the Israeli Parliament has ratified the peace agreement with Bahrain. And on Sunday, it's going to be debated by the Israeli government and get its approval. I think that the answer to your question is tremendously important, and surprisingly, I have to say, it's a very simple answer. There is something unique in my mind in what happens in the room between us and our Emirati friends and partners, and between us and our Bahraini friends and partners. And this is reflected not only in the warmth and a very quick understanding between the two sides, but also in our quite mind-boggling ability to agree on priorities and on things that we want to push forward. And from the very first minute of the whole conversation, there was a very swift and clear understanding that we want to focus on deliverables. And the instruction that I get from my minister is to implement as quickly as possible, in the fullest way possible, all the agreements that are going to translate the peace into tangible achievements. And in the conversations we had in Abu Dhabi, with the delegation of the couple of some like 15 or 20 director generals of the Israeli government, the spirit that came from the leadership of Abu Dhabi, from His Highness the Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdallah, from other senior officials of the government, was we have to do free movement of people, goods, and money. And I would add to this a flow of technology. Once we are able to do this, which I think very shortly is going to be reflected in citizens of the UAE and Israeli citizens moving between Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Israel, and vice versa. Once we do this, it's going to become not only a platform for creating tangible deliverables, but it's also going to, I think, to play some kind of a model for the region. Secondly, and I think that's tremendously important, and I think the contribution of this administration, and I have to say the very effective interventions and facilitations of Brian, I think there is a seed of creating new regional configurations. Because at the end of the day, I think what all of us share, what Sheikh Khalifa and myself share, what I share with my counterpart in Bahrain, Sheikh Abdallah, we want stability, prosperity, and security. And when we look at regional stability and security, I think we view some things that are similar. And I can see it already taking shape, not only in the conversations between us and the Emirates, but also in the conversations between us and some other Arab countries. And more than this, I see the reflection of this in the minds of our partners outside of the region, for example, in Europe. And this brings me to the conclusion that the Abraham Accords, the peace treaty between the UAE and Israel, which I really have to say, I don't think one can exaggerate the importance of the political leadership of the Emirates in moving down this path. I think this is a dramatic strategic achievement, not only between us and the UAE, but for the whole region.
Absolutely right. This is when you have a leadership with a strategic vision and a clear vision. Ambassador Khalifa.
Thank you, Dr. Abdesam. Let me thank you for organizing Abu Dhabi strategic debate. This is becoming a landmark. And I extend my greetings to Ambassador Brian Hawk and Ambassador Alon Ishpitz. And Ambassador Alon, I'm glad also to have you together on this panel. But at this time, Dr. Abdesam, I would like also to at the outset to extend our condolences on the death of Dr. Saib Ariqat. It is a great loss to the Palestinian people. In this regard, I would like also to express our solidarity with the Palestinian people and with the family and relatives of Dr. Saib Ariqat. As well, I would like to express our sorrow over all the victims of this pandemic of COVID-19 everywhere in the world. Now, Dr. Sam, I think UAE has a long-standing record of commitment to and working for regional stability and security and for peaceful resolution of conflicts and for economic development and progress of the region. I would reiterate Dr. Anwar Gergash in his statement yesterday that there is a need for an approach that promotes collaboration instead of confrontation, tolerance instead of extremism, and constructive pragmatism instead of ideology. And I think our leadership, this Abraham Peace Accord didn't come just overnight. It is an accumulative process. And our leadership assists the geostrategic and geopolitical development of the region with a very realistic and visionary way, and took a courageous and strategic decision to establish peace with the State of Israel and to establish normal diplomatic relations based on the best interest of UAE, as well as the need to contribute positively to the Middle East peace process. And this, I think this contribution came at a very critical time when we first emphasized on the need to hold on the plans for annexation of the occupied territories. By that, it created, when this has been achieved, it created new momentum for peace. And I think now the Abraham Peace Accords between Emirates and Israel, and between Bahrain and Israel, Sudan, and have created momentum for peace in the region. And by the virtue of this peace, because this is what we have described before, is a warm peace about relations, about cooperation in many different and various fields, in economy, in investment, in science and technology, in cultural exchange, in tourism, transportation, logistic services, health services, and food security, and extra. So, for the people of the region, by seeing the fruits of this warm peace, I think it would create more momentum for more peace in the region. I think the region has went through a lot of crises, and this cycle of crises, of destruction, of reproducing conflicts, this peace has become a strategic breakthrough, a realistic breakthrough. And we hope this would soon the people of the region will see the benefits of peace, Abraham Peace Accords, and see the fruits of that. It has already between Emirates and the State of Israel started. Just first group of tourists have arrived in Dubai. And this will for the region, will be a model. So we hope all the countries in the region will see that there is a hope for future, there is a hope for more prosperous region, and would follow suit.
And we in EPC also took the spirit and signed an MOU with the INSS, and we had them as, we host them here in EPC, and we build on that. People to people also is very important in this regard. The second question to all of you also, and I will start with Ambassador Hawk. What is the ideal formula to establish a trilateral American, Emirati, Israeli relationship that becomes a premise to impact the redistribution of power in the region?
Well, we are blessed at the current time because we have had three great leaders in the countries that you described that are all visionary, and they're all men of courage. And I think having at the same time Mohammed bin Zayed, President Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, all together occupying office at the same time, and the president, when he came to Riyadh, made it very clear what his priorities were going to be. He talked about countering Iran, talked about defeating ISIS, talked about the problem of Islamist extremism, and he also said that we're going to work on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This vision, I think, was something that the entire region, much of the region, could get behind, especially in the Gulf. And that's, we also were very fortunate with some very good ambassadors here in Washington, D.C., with both Ron Dermer and Youssef Aloy-Taiba. There's an old expression that personnel is policy. And as I look at all the key people, we were very fortunate, having Alon Oshfeiz at the Foreign Ministry, Jared Kushner at the White House, the strong relationships we had with the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, Bahrainis, Kuwaitis. It's been a very productive time amongst these countries working very closely together. I think that anytime you want to have significant change, it requires people of courage and people of vision to step forward. And we had that take place when we were able to get UAE. I know that many countries, not only in the Middle East, but beyond, are very envious of the Emirates and what they have been able to accomplish. These things are never without risk. And I remember when we were working through a lot of our decisions over the last few years in this administration, doing something big always has some element of risk. But we saw this enormous potential that I think was hidden, especially by countries that try to sow so much division and violence and bloodshed, whether it's non-state actors like ISIS or the Iranian regime, which for 41 years has been singularly devoted to preventing peace between Arabs and Israelis, preventing peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. We put out a vision for peace that many Arab countries said was a credible and good faith proposal that should be the basis for talks. We still hope that the Palestinian leadership comes to the table. I think that there's enormous frustration among Arab leaders in the region that once again, the Palestinian leadership is missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. We'd like to see them come to the table because we have put forth a vision that does have a two-state solution, and many people didn't think that we were going to be putting that forward as a vision, but we did. And there's so much opportunity there to build on with this economic and political vision. So what we've done is we've had two tracks working. We certainly put forward a vision that we think was good faith and credible. We hope the Palestinians come to the table so that we can work through that and make progress on this. But we're also making progress on the Arab-Israeli side. I've never accepted this theory of linkage, that all of the conflicts and the instability in the Middle East can be traced to Arabs and Israelis and the struggles that they've had. Obviously, the Arab Spring demonstrated that the instability, there are many drivers, and we shouldn't reduce it to just one link. So I think that we've done a good job with the defeat of ISIS, countering Iran, standing with our friends, countering our adversaries. That's a winning formula. And I really hope that that continues for many, many years ahead in American foreign policy, because it's been a winning formula. We were able to accomplish so much, 3 peace agreements in 2 months. And prior to that, there wasn't a single peace agreement in 26 years. So I think, I've talked to Jared about this many times, we've never been more optimistic about the trend lines in the Middle East, especially as I talk with so many young people in the region, and also the young Iranians. 2/3 of the Iranian people were born after the revolution. They're tired of so much violence and conflict, and they're tired of the poverty, the misery, the oppression, the corruption, the lack of accountability. And like what Alon was saying earlier, we're looking for sovereignty, prosperity, transparency, accountability. These are the themes that I think some very important leaders in the Middle East are grabbing hold of. And the more that we see the success of that, and we're seeing it every day of the week with UAE and Israel, it's going to be a model. I think I heard that earlier from Ambassador Al-Khalif. It's going to be a model for more countries. And I've already had at least one Muslim country come and visit with me to talk about what is the path to normalization. They want to learn from the lessons of UAE. It's going to keep going. This is so much positive momentum, and I'm very hopeful that it's going to continue. And that each day is going to help transform the Middle East and to make it much more peaceful and stable, sovereign and prosperous.
Great, and absolutely. There is two axes, one axis for stability and the other for conflict and crisis and blood. So countries in the region, which path they want to use? Is it for the future or to keep themselves in the stagnated situation, which we are? Ambassador Allen?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ibtissam. Let me start by saying that I fully agree with what Brian has said about the importance of the role of political leadership and certainly in this case, visionary and courageous political leadership. And I fully affiliate myself with what Brian has said about our two ambassadors actually three ambassadors, if I may, and that's Ambassador Friedman in Jerusalem and Ambassadors Dermer and Uteba in Washington. I think it's a really rare case in which three ambassadors shape history, not less than this. It's very impressive. And I think all these three gentlemen really have to be tremendously proud about themselves. So that's the first point. The second point is, I truly believe that at the core of what a triangle of the US, Emirates, and Israel can do, not only for ourselves, but for shaping the landscape of the region, is anchored in our ability to use technology. One of the most impressive things that I've seen about the interaction between the Emirates and Israel was that the first piece of cooperation that came out into the sunlight was cooperation in the fight against COVID-19 between totally private sector on the Emirati side and on the Israeli side, and I think it sends out a message that we, as you said, Dr. Ibtissam, there is no point in focusing on collective delusions that are not going to lead us anywhere. It's much wiser and certainly in my mind much more effective and beneficial if we will focus our intentions and our resources and our time on things that can improve the daily lives of millions of people. And the fact that there is a company in the Emirates and a company in Israel, private sector companies, can do together medicine and medical equipment that is focusing on the fight against COVID-19, I think is tremendously important. Thirdly, and this is something that I think is an important rare case. I think from day one, which means basically a couple of hours after the Abraham Accords declaration, we started thinking and doing together strategic messaging. And this is, in my mind, indispensable element of the whole thing, because I think that if, as Sheikh Khalifa has said, we have to touch people, there is no substitute to us speaking together to our different people. we have to tell them what is this about, and we have to tell them what we intend to do. And we have, as Sheikh Khalifa said, we have to show them what we call usually the fruits of peace. And this is not going to explain itself by itself. We have to be the spokespersons of this Abraham Accords. And last but not least, and I think Brian spoke about this very eloquently, and actually I think dedicated the last probably 3 years of his contribution to the administration. There is something in what we are doing, which is presenting to the people of the region a model that stands vis-a-vis the other model, which is led by the Iranians. We are trying to do things that are going to alleviate suffering, to improve daily life of people, to give them better education, food security, energy security, affordable healthcare. And on the other side, there are people that investing billions of dollars into killing people. I think that there is a stark difference between what we're trying to do and what the other side of the equilibrium is trying to do. And I personally don't have the slightest doubt that we are going to be on the winning side.
Absolutely. Creating a successful model, attract the other to join in terms of the people and governments. This is I think the task both sides should work on it. Ambassador Khalifa, please.
At the outset, I should also extend my thanks and appreciation for the leadership on 3 countries. And I think this couldn't have happened without the courage and without the visionary efforts and decisions that all the leaders took in this regard. And the special appreciation, of course, for President Trump and his administration and their efforts in this regard. But yes, also I would like here to emphasize that this is the Abraham Peace Accord is about Arab-Israeli conflict, about solving and approaching this conflict in a strategic and in a realistic way. And it is not intended to be against any third party. Of course, I cannot agree more than what Ambassador Brian and Alon emphasized, that there is a need for a real, tangible result that would drive the region toward the future, toward the people-to-people connection. Now we are in the process of enhancing cooperation, enhancing relations, and exploring all the opportunities that this peace can make in the region. I think this is a mega project. This is a project. This is an ongoing process. Yet to see the multipliers of the region. And as much as we make more hope of the people in the region, more country, the mindset of the people would change toward peace, towards prosperity, towards economic development, and towards also solving and conflicts in a very realistic, beneficial for all parties. Here, as we go through, we have already signed with the United States strategic dialogue and consultation instrument document that would yes, we are long strategic partners and allies with long history of relations, but also we have put more organized, institutionalized structure to have a dialogue on all aspects of as well as with Israel. The already signed MOUs and agreements and what will come in the pipeline would also make the legal basis and for future. And we see how our two private sector is keen to have more and more of work together.
Okay, Ambassador Haq, in the light of Abraham Accords, what are the chances of continuing strategic dialogue between U.S. and its friends in the region to design a convergent perspective on pressing issues in the light of Washington's preoccupation with a critical domestic agenda?
Could you give me that question one more time, maybe, so I can make sure I answer it fully for you?
What I'm saying, in the light of the Abraham Accord, what are the chances of continuing strategic dialogues between U.S. and its friend in the region to design a convergent perspective on pressing issues in the light of Washington preoccupation with a critical domestic agenda?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I've always had a lot of confidence in our system of government's ability to do two things at the same time. You do have periods where there is a pretty deep domestic focus, but I think in this administration, look, I think governments around the world are all struggling with the same pandemic. They're all focusing on economic issues. I think in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf, you're looking, a lot of leaders there are looking to diversify their economy. And I think Israel presents a great opportunity for that, for many of the reasons that Sheikh Khalifa talked about, and also that Alon mentioned in terms of technology is so important, especially around agriculture technology, desalinization, healthcare. It goes on and on. And I think more countries are going to want that. As I said earlier, I think there's a real envy that other governments are feeling, other Arab governments are experiencing, looking at how much Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed has been able to harvest the fruits of this peace. That's only going to get bigger and larger. So in our strategic dialogue with our partners in the region, I talked a little bit about this earlier. I think you've got to have an alignment of vision. And you know, when I look at Sheikh Zayed as the founder of UAE and his vision of tolerance, that his son is carried on as the crown prince, and then that lines up so well with so many of the kind of the foundational principles that the United States has. That's a friend that we can work very closely with, and we can get a lot done together if we focus on shared interests. But not even that. I mean, last year, the Emirates hosted Pope Francis. It was the first visit of a pope to the Gulf. This is obviously these decisions are never easily taken because there's always some risk, as I said earlier. But I think we've still got really good people in place in the Middle East, also in Israel. That's going to continue. I'm hopeful that in the coming years, that everybody will understand the success of the foreign policy that we've had in place in the Middle East over the last 4 years. Defeating ISIS, countering Iran, dealing with extremism, working to put the Arab-Israeli conflict, turning the page on it so that we are helping so many of the young people in the region have a bright future and not a dark future. I remember a conversation I had with Saudi's foreign minister, Adel Al-Jubeir. He likes to explain it and maybe this is a good way of getting at your answer about like the basis of our dialogue with our friends in the region. There's the vision of darkness and there's a vision of light. And you see more and more governments in the region and the people deciding they've had enough darkness. You've got high Iranian interference. There's not a lot of light. Lebanon having some of its worst protests in its history. And then massive protests in Iraq. Syria is a failed state. Yemen is a failed state. Iraq has struggled with Iranian interference, and then the Iranian people themselves who haven't seen their standard of living improve in 41 years. You know, it's hard to argue, like we were talking about earlier, success is inspiring, and failure, which is what we've seen so many of these other governments offer, a very dark vision of the future. And this is a failed vision. And I think people are waking up to this. And you're going to see more governments decide that they want a bright future. They believe in sort of a vision of light and not darkness. That really should be the basis of our sort of strategic dialogue with so many of our friends in the region. And we should do everything we can to counter the forces of darkness who feed on, Alon was saying earlier, the billions of dollars that have been spent killing each other, killing others. The Iranian regime spends, they're still to this day the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and anti-Semitism. That needs to be countered. We can't accommodate that. We cannot go back to the policy of telling our friends in the region that they need to share the area with Iran. It's a recipe for failure. So we've had a lot of success. It's a great foundation to keep building on, and I'm confident we will.
And especially with this circumstances during the pandemic, you need more cooperation rather than concentrating on conflict and interfering in others' country. Ambassador Oshfeiz?
Thank you, Doctor. I will start by saying something, actually echoing Brian, and I say this as a staunch Israeli patriot, and in the most humble way possible, really. I have the full confidence in the leadership of the US. And I think all of us have to acknowledge in the strongest and in the deepest way possible the fact that this wouldn't have been possible without the vision of the president, and not less than this, and I say this in the most appreciative way, the tens of thousands of hours of American senior officials, Jared Kushner, Avi Berkovitz, the ambassadors in the region, Brian, really, these people have invested tens of thousands of their lives into this venture. I want to add on top of this that I don't think one can exaggerate the importance of the once again the courageous political leadership of the UAE, the willingness to come forward and try to shape the face of this region in the right direction, what Brian calls the side of the light. I think is not less than heartwarming. Now, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and a large part of this was dedicated to Israel-US relationship. And I think we go through cycles of conversation that people ask themselves, where is the US going to put its resources, whether it is money or commitment or time? And I have to say that after, as I said, almost 30 years in this job, in this profession, I do strongly believe that the US is the indispensable nation. And I do strongly believe that there is no substitute to American leadership in the region. And I do believe that the US has not only vested strategic interests in keeping shaping the present and the future of this region, but I think it's also founded on a vision and on a very noble set of values and morals. And once again, as I said, I strongly believe in the continuing commitment of the US to lead this process. And as Brian said, I think that 2 peace agreements in less than 30 days, that's quite an impressive and nice harvest.
Absolutely. Ambassador Allen, I will take this opportunity to ask you, how can Abraham Accords become a catalyst for forging a durable Israeli-Palestinian peace?
I think it's a very important question. I think Sheikh Khalifa and Brian have already referred to this in some of their remarks. So let me say that from day one, I think there was a very solid understanding on our side that this does not come on the expense of the Palestinians, and it certainly does not close any door. If it does something, I strongly believe that it opens the doors. And Dr. Ibtissam, once again, the theme that comes time and again in what you're saying is that we have to detach ourselves from unrealistic and collective delusions. Right. I think that pragmatism and realism is the flavor of the decade. We have to stick to our morals, but we have to find the most effective and realistic way to implement them on the ground, in the lives of people. And I want to stress in the strongest way possible that I think that the door of direct conversation between us and the Palestinians is wide open. I want to stress in the strongest way possible that there are, as I said, tangible deliverables that both Israelis and Palestinians can share. I think, as you've said, Dr. Ibtissam, the example of cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority when it comes to COVID-19 is a shining and a very important example of the things that we can do together. And I think that the best way to do this is to move forward with exactly these things. I know that, as Sheikh Khalifa has said, I know that it is important to the Emirates, and I think that the best thing for all of us is for the Palestinian leadership to take this opportunity and to walk through the open door of direct dialogue. Thanks.
Thank you. Ambassador Khalifa, how can the paths and prospects of the peace accords be affected by the competition of superpowers in the region?
Sam, I think peace in the Middle East and peace between Arabs, Israel, solving the Arab-Israeli conflict, solving peacefully the Arab-Palestinian conflict, is commanding a unanimous, a consensus demand in the international community. This is one. Second thing, United Arab Emirates is maintaining strong and friendly relations and partnership with all the major players in the international arena. With it, the P5 of Security Council, and other all friendly relations. Third, I think the reaction we have receiving from all corners of the world that appreciating the peace accords, their reaction is very positive, very encouraging in this regard. And thirdly, I think the benefit of peace and the stability of the region and the future prosperity of the region is of keen interest, and all the major powers have a stake in that. And I'm quite confident that yes, there is a competition, and always there has been a competition in the region between what we call major powers. But as far as the peace process is concerned, as far as the benefits and the future of Abraham peace accords between Israel and United Arab Emirates, and between Israel and Bahrain, Sudan, and whoever would come next, would not be adversely affected by this competition. The competition is not detrimental to the peace in the region. All peace-loving nations has been very encouraging in their reaction, and this is also give us more confidence that we can be sure that they will not work in a way that would derail this process. It is in the benefit of all stakeholders.
Hi, Ambassador Hawk, how can the trilateral bloc of US and UAE and Israel increase the number of winners of this peace deal as a new leading project in this region? How can this trilateral bloc expand the list of potential countries to join the project, beside those whom they already joined?
We've always had our eye on other countries that would like to make peace-loving nations. And I remember after we were able to finish negotiations among the US, UAE, and Israel, and we had Bahrain, we decided to, I remember I flew with Secretary Pompeo and then with Jared Kushner, we went around to a number of countries just to listen and to see, how they were viewing the normalizations. And when we were in Sudan meeting with Prime Minister Hamdok and also with General Burhan, we had a very productive discussion there. We were talking about a range of things, including Sudan ending its association with being a state sponsor of terrorism. And we were able to finish that. We have been so supportive of Sudan's transition to democracy. And we argued that making peace is one of the ways to signal to the world that you're ready for a new kind of Sudan. And that I think that they are. I think that's certainly where the Sudanese people are. We need to keep building and expanding this out so that we expand the circle of those countries that are interested in a much better future for their own people. And so I don't go into sort of confidential discussions that I and others have with other countries, but we're having them on a very regular basis. I think we all know who they are, but out of respect for their sort of confidentiality and keeping these discussions confidential, the UAE-Israel peace deal was one of the biggest stories in decades, and it never leaked. There wasn't a single leak to the press. And we did the same thing with Bahrain. And so we think it's very important to be discreet and to earn the trust of the countries that we speak with. But I think everybody does know the kind of countries that are thinking about it. But I've had a couple of countries talk to me that I was surprised that they were reaching out and wanting to have a discussion. That doesn't mean they're ready to go tomorrow, but it does mean that they're paying attention And I really liked the conversation earlier with Sheikh Khalifa and Alon talking about, I didn't put it this way, but so this is the burden of leadership to make, if you decide to do something that's courageous and visionary, you got to make sure that it's successful. This would have been very easy to make this a kind of symbolic piece, but that's not what we're seeing at all. And I love these leaders who want to also implement. Strategy is important, having diplomatic wins is important, but at the end of the day, they're hollow victories if you don't have the peoples coming together. And now you see Israelis going to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and the reverse. You're seeing Emiratis wanting to go to Tel Aviv and to Jerusalem and to visit the mosque. And this is the kind of thing that it ought to become the new normal. It ought to be something which becomes just part of the fabric of the Middle East. And that's why I think we're going to have more success going forward. Let me just also mention, Alon was right to identify David Friedman. I was thinking about it more from where I sit here in Washington, but David played a critical role in pulling all this together. We haven't talked a lot about Bahrain, but their ambassador here, the King and the Crown Prince in Manama, great partners, terrific people. We're having great conversations with the Saudis as we have. Riyadh was where we had the Riyadh Summit. 57 Arab Muslim nations came together. I remember talking with so many of the foreign ministers after the speeches by King Salman and President Trump. And what they said was, finally, somebody who gets the region. It's no secret that a lot of our friends in the region felt betrayed by the Iran nuclear deal. And I've always believed that America should be no better friend and no worse enemy. And I think that we need to stand with our friends. And that means countering those that have, as I said earlier, a very dark vision, and standing with the people who have the right vision. If leaders like the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed and the King of Bahrain and the Prime Minister of Israel are all going to make courageous steps in the direction of peace, they should never be left wondering, where does America stand? And that's critical. I think Alon talked earlier about the sort of indispensability of American leadership. It is important. It's also important to sort of get the basics right. You've got to stand with your friends and partners. And if you decide to do the opposite or to kind of do something halfway, you're not going to have peace agreements. It's just simply not going to happen. And there were a lot of factors that came together. We've talked about many of them, but I've always, Jared's talked about this publicly. The president's decision to counter Iran became one of the really important platforms that we could bring the Emiratis and the Israelis together to deal with a common threat. The US, Israel, UAE have all been under threat from Iran in various ways. The UAE with the Houthis in Yemen, and also with the Saudis, the Israelis from the north, and also in the United States. Iran sponsoring so much violence that has contributed to the deaths of so many Americans. Iran is responsible for the deaths of 603 Americans in Iraq alone. We've got to get serious about this kind of threat, and President Trump has done exactly that. When you do that, a lot of other good things can happen. But getting Iran right is critical. If you don't have the right strategy on Iran, you really can forget more peace agreements in the Gulf.
Ambassador Hawk, I have a question, but I have a comment on what you said. I think it's success. It's easy to go to war. It's easy to initiate any conflict, but it's the most difficult how to bring peace and peace deals. And I do believe that also UAE repeated more than one time, and that this deal is not against anybody in the region. It is for stability, bringing peace and stability. And if Iran wants to join with a new approach this is open for everybody in the region to join, as I said, if they want to be access of peace and stability. My question to you, does the new coming of the new administration, will this encourage others to join this peace deals?
Let me first take your first comment. You're right. And the president talked about this during after the phone call with Prime Minister Hamdok and Prime Minister Netanyahu. He said that, you know, at some point he could see Iran joining the peace accords, the Abraham peace agreement. Now, what did he mean by that? The Iranian people do not wish death to Israel. The Iranian people do not wish death to the United States. This is something which a very small percentage of Iran, it happens to be confined to the Iranian regime, which clings to power on the basis of brute force after it murdered 1,500 of its own people back in November. But the Iranian people, I think, very broadly like what they're seeing across the Gulf. When you look at you look at cities around the Gulf, and there's so much hope and opportunity and progress. And I'm confident that the Iranian people look across the Gulf and feel like they've been robbed of decades of progress because they have a regime that is a kleptocracy and it robs its own people blind to fund sectarian violence. That's not the vision of light, and that's not the vision of the leaders, I think, in the Gulf and other parts of the Middle East as well. We're seeing countries like Sudan, which in 1967 was the home of the three no's, now coming and making peace with Israel after being and having an official policy of belligerence with Israel. I think you're going to see, this is an inspiring vision. And peace, as you said, peace is hard. War is pretty easy in some ways. Peace is very hard to do. And it's cost some people their lives. President Sadat, I recently had a chance to meet his widow. And you see the consequences of very difficult choices when you meet the widow of a former president of a country. So broadly, I don't really, look, I've been pretty busy with the job that I had in the administration working on the peace agreements. We still got, you know, some months left in this administration. I don't want to opine on what future administrations would be doing. I just know what policy works, and I've seen it firsthand. And I think that we do need to do some stock taking and objectively look at the enormous success that we've had getting our policies right in the Middle East. It has been a terrific record that I think Americans are rightly proud of. We've had a lot of fatigue with the Middle East. We've spent trillions of dollars and we've lost a lot of American lives in the Middle East. And Jared talks regularly about how optimistic he is. And I'm also very optimistic about the future as more people get behind the vision shown by the Crown Prince, the King of Bahrain, the Prime Minister of Israel, the Prime Minister of Sudan, and other countries. It's going to build.
Absolutely. Ambassador Osh, can the two parties, or even now the three parties of the treaty, find a formula that employs the accumulation of their successful development experiences and their regional and international relations to lead developmental and economic projects in the region that can serve as a new model that contributes to the solution of chronic conflicts. Yes, we have that Abraham Fund. Can this convince the Palestinian leadership to join and to see the fruits of this peace agreement?
Well, Dr. Ibtissam, I don't have the slightest doubt that the answer to your question is a positive one. Let me start by outlining what is, I think, the three elements that are going to push this thing forward. First of all, as I said, all of us have to be very grateful for what the US and the president have done on this regard. You know, one of the things that that keep coming to my mind is the fact that our first official flight to Abu Dhabi was led by senior advisor Kushner, together with Brian. If I'm not mistaken, it was his last day in office as the special coordinator for Iran.
That's true. That is true.
And special envoy Berkowitz. And then a couple of weeks afterwards, we had the same flight to Bahrain, led by Secretary of Treasury, with some senior friends from the National Security Council in Washington. I have to say that getting Senior Advisor Kushner and Secretary of Treasury shuttling on planes in the sky of the Middle East that frequently, I don't think it is something that we have just to brush off the table. This is, you know, it's dedicated time of some very busy people, and I think that their presence there is designed to reflect something to the people that you've just mentioned, which is we, the US, or the US, are committed to this, and they are very much invested in the success of this. Point one. Point two is I have to say that one of the most encouraging and spirit-lifting things that I've seen in the last couple of months, and I have to confess that nowadays about 70% or 60% of my time is dedicated to the implementation of the Abraham Accords. But one of the most really amazing things that I've seen is the last meeting between my foreign minister Gabi Ashkenazi and His Excellency Sheikh Abdallah, the foreign minister of the UAE, in which and my minister sends his best regards, Sheikh Khalifa. So if you can pass this to your minister, these pictures of the foreign minister of Israel and the foreign minister of the UAE, accompanied by the foreign minister of Germany, visiting the Holocaust Museum in Berlin, and then having a one-on-one, very long conversation, which touches on a very wide, I presume, spectrum of issues, and the reflection of this to our people, I think is the right platform to spread the wisdom of the Abraham Accords. Last but not least, and I find this one of the most important things, and that's exactly the guidance, as I said, that we get from our minister. We are exchanging in a very rapid pace. We are exchanging a language of agreements. I believe that that by the end of the process, we will have probably about let's say around 20 agreements between the Emirates and Israel. And I think Sheikh Khalifa gave you the whole menu, I think, in his first answer to your question. Our ability to implement these things, exactly as you said, Dr. Ibtissam, the fact that I believe that sometime during the second half of December 2020, there will be frequent flights between the Emirates and Israel. And there will be every week hundreds of Emiratis and Israeli going both directions. The fact that Emiratis will come to Israel and will see the beaches, the markets, will speak and converse and touch Israelis, and vice versa. The fact that Israelis will go freely to Abu Dhabi and Dubai and will do business. And will have dinner with their Emirati friends. And the outcome of these visits, which is going, I don't have the slightest doubt about it, which is going to be reflected in technological and economic cooperation, including on regional projects. I think is going to be a torch. Even more than this, I think it's going to be a beacon and a compass for the whole region to follow. And I think we are trusted with a strategic mission, which its weight and importance go way beyond what the UAE and Israel can do for each other.
Thank you, Ambassador Khalifa. Ambassador Khalifa.
To some, I cannot agree more that, as we have been saying all this during this panel, that the fruits of the peace accord, balancing and the imagination now and the vision and all the projects, people to people connections, and all this would create the momentum for peace, for the momentum for that people in the region appreciate this peace. And but I would like to emphasize as well that there is much also needed efforts as far as Middle East peace process is concerned, as far as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israeli-Palestinian negotiation, and as far as the two-state solution needed more flexible, more efforts, and to build on the Abraham peace accords, the momentum that has created need to be nurtured more, and to think really on this. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that Emirate is not an alternative or a substitute for the Palestinians, and I think ultimately there's a need for the Palestinians and the Israelis to sit together and find a way to solve this conflict. From our side, we think there is a need and there's a strong support for the legitimate demands of the Palestinians to an independent state on the borders of 1967 and with East Jerusalem as a capital. How this will be achieved, in what conditions, and what this is ultimately is up to the Israelis and the Palestinians to look into that. But I think the Abraham peace accords has created the momentum, and this opportunity shouldn't be lost.
Right. Ambassador Hawk, can this treaty serve as a catalyst in bringing together Egypt and Jordan on the one hand, and Israel on the other, to review their relations and take steps forward? And this is the same question for Ambassador Alon as well.
Why don't I let Alon take the first swing at that question, and then I'm happy to go next. He's closer to it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Look, I don't think one can even one is not allowed to make the slightest mistake about the strategic importance of Egypt and Jordan for the stability of the region, A, and B, from an Israeli point of view, when it comes to the way we look at the future of the region. Brian has alluded to his meeting with meeting with the widow of late President Anwar Sadat, I was a school boy when late President Sadat visited my hometown in the northern part of Israel, Haifa, and I remember very vividly the wave of the huge wave of joy that came with the visit, and then with the fact that the Israelis understood that this whole concept of how we live in the Middle East and how we can interact and coexist with our neighbors has taken a dramatic strategic shift. And I think Israelis have to be very much appreciative for this leadership role of Egypt. And I think Israelis have to be very much appreciative when it comes to the strategic, peaceful relations that we have with Jordan. Now, I've said in the beginning of our conversation that I strongly believe in the dramatic strategic nature of the Abraham Accords and the peace treaties between Israel and the UAE and the peace and Israel and Bahrain. And the magic of this, or the potential of the magic of this in my mind, is the combination of these 4 peace agreements that we have now, and the promise, which I think goes way beyond the hope, the promise of combining those 4 agreements with additional agreements that I not only hope, but I don't have the doubt that they will follow. There will be other countries that are going to join this noble club, I should say, and I think the trend at the end of 2020 is an amazing trend, and it is a trend which is much better than, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. So I would say that we have to keep pushing this wagon up the hill, and we have to keep investing in order to enlarge as quickly as possible the club of the 4 peace agreements, together also with Sudan, obviously. I think that the fact that Sudan has joined the club of peace is a very important one, because it adds another important part to the concept of how do we spread the peace agreements across the Middle East.
Brian, okay, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned that you talked to many countries to join Abraham. I would like to ask you, what was their concern? I mean, those whom they didn't join, what was their concern? Or the prices they wanted?
Well, what I've noticed, and this is important for future normalizations, is what I've described as the sound of silence. I think before somebody makes the decision, the country decides to make, the decision to normalize, there's always a risk of violence breaking out and unrest and instability and things of that sort. But what we found after UAE announced, and then Bahrain announced, and Sudan announced, and when Saudi Arabia granted permanent overflight rights to Israeli planes going to and from UAE, the sound of silence, it ends up validating the vision by the leaders that now's the right time. I don't know if something like this could have happened 5-10 years ago. But we certainly, as we worked around the region, as I got around either by myself or with the Secretary of State or with Jared or with the President, it was very clear what their priorities are of so many of these governments. And they line up very well with what their people want. That's great. It's great to see. So a lot of the conversations, I think, are going to be emboldened because, to some extent, the first movers have de-risked normalization. They've demonstrated that the risk is not as high as a lot of people scared them into thinking was the case. And we should not understate the role that sort of scaremongering and rabble-rousing can play to shape people's decisions away from doing the right thing. One of the things that I think people respect about President Trump is that he ends up doing what he says he's going to do. If you look at the Riyadh speech, he's done almost everything he said he would do. Even those that disagree with some of his decisions, which I get, they respect the fact that he kept his word. That's an important thing. I've always said as a diplomat, it's pretty easy to work for a president who enforces his red lines. Mm-hmm. And that sort of trust in the United States, one, getting the right theory of the case, but also doing what you say you're going to do, those are all important factors in getting big diplomatic wins, which is what we've done. I don't think I'm trying to dodge the answer to your question. Part of it's because these are private conversations, but the part that I want to highlight is the sound of silence. And also what we're seeing is that the model works. It's working, and you've got leaders committed to making it work. Alon said he's spending a lot of his time doing the implementation. I'm a big believer in implementation and just sort of grinding out all of the necessary work to make a success of something, as I said earlier, so that we avoid kind of a symbolic win. So that's sort of my take on it. I think that they've taken a lot of the risk out of making these steps, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier. And I think a lot of leaders in the region and outside of it are privately thanking the Crown Prince for making it easier for them to start taking. And some of these countries, it's not going to be giant steps. It's going to be incremental but positive steps in the direction of normalization. There's always been a lot of stuff under the table. I had chaired a dialogue between Israel, UAE, and the United States during this administration. It was kept quiet until it wasn't quiet, but now this is coming out, above, sort of on the table. It's not hidden below the surface. That's when you do that, as Alon said. What did he say? I can't remember the number of all these different agreements that have been done. I mean, that's a record time. I was there that night when we had dinner with, we had Alon there, we had Mayor Ben Shabbat, we had Jared and I were there with Avi and Adam Bowler. We also had Sheikh Tanoun and Dr. Gargash. We had ABZ. It was so exciting. Alon talked about this. There was so much energy in the room. And there was this instant rapport about let's get going. Let's get serious about this piece. Let's make this a warm piece. And it was kind of nice because, we had helped broker this, but then we just kind of pulled back that evening and let the Emiratis and the Israelis, talk without us hanging around. And now it's just sort of moving along so nicely. This is an opportunity that awaits many countries, not only in the Middle East, but in Africa, but also in Asia.
Great. Before I end, I will ask one question for all of you, and I will start with Khalifa. From your point of view, what is the main challenge for this Abraham Accord, or this peace agreement? And this is for all of you as well. Khalifa. I want to mention just before this that was in the perspective that the main challenge will be, before signing, Arab Street. But to tell you, there was no one demonstration all around the Arab world condemning that agreement between UAE and Israel. Ambassador Khalifa, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ibtissam. I would say it in a very, very short 2 words. The most challenging thing is to bring back the Israelis and the Palestinians to the negotiating table.
Ambassador Allen?
I want to start with something different, with your permission, Dr. Ibtissam. I have to tell you that I've seen Brian on different occasions. I've never seen him that happy. And I have to say that all of us have to be very grateful for what he's done. And I have to say that the two events that he described, the first one, once again, Brian, I'm not sure that I've seen that brilliant of a chairmanship as your chairmanship that day. And the second thing, I fully share your sentiment about the dinner that you've just described a couple of minutes ago. The most important thing for me there was to see the leadership of the Emirates and the Israeli side sharing in the most friendly way possible a full and clear understanding about what has to be done in a matter of seconds. And this is really, I've never seen something like this before. I would say that the two things that we have to deal with in the most effective way possible in order to make sure that this continues to blossom is implementing in the most effective and quickest way possible the practical understandings and agreements that we have between us in a way that will show Israelis and Emiratis and the region that there are fruits to this, to the Abraham Accords. And the second thing, I think we very much share a vision for what does it mean to have a safe, stable, and prosperous region. And we know exactly who's leading the other side. And I think it's our duty to fight and to win this battle and struggle.
Ambassador Cook?
Well, I'll mention one other thing that Alon talked about at that dinner we had. I won't give all the details, but to sort of prove Alon's point about how productive it is, I remember Dr. Gargash had said he had identified a certain area that he wanted to make quick progress in. And he said, look, I know you have a Knesset and you've got this and things can take a long time in your system to get through. And I recognize that. This is just something that I want to flag as a priority for me and something that I'd like to get going on. And Alon in the meeting then said, I brought the documents to do it this evening. He had come completely prepared for exactly, he anticipated the very question that Dr. Gargash was going to ask and that he wanted to make progress in. And Alon had already brought all of the papers to get things signed and to get things going. So look, the US, the Emirates, Israel, we're blessed with really great public servants. And I saw that on full display that night. Alon is right. It was when we got off the flight, and it was just such a jubilant moment as a diplomat. Clear-cut victories in foreign policy are hard to come by. But when we were on that flight, we flew right over Riyadh and then made a left turn to go over to UAE. And then we land and the red carpet is rolled out. And there is the national security advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel in Abu Dhabi giving remarks in Arabic. And then we all went into the room, and you had the flags of Israel, UAE, and the United States, and Jared and Dr. Gargash and Meir Ben Shabbat all sitting there. Powerful moment and very inspiring to be kind of a witness to history. That dinner that night, it just was so obvious to me that this relationship is going to take off in really big ways. And all we have to do is get out of the way. Which is kind of, we've obviously worked on this very closely, but this is something which, in great credit to Israel and UAE and their public servants, have really accelerated this and made this so productive. In terms of the challenges, Sheikh Khalifa talked about the Israeli-Palestinian peace. We also want to see progress on that. I wish the Palestinian leadership would come to the table. We have put out a vision for peace that would mean so much for the Palestinian people. It was endorsed by the World Bank and the IMF, and we had FIFA there. We had CEOs from around the world talking about a future of prosperity and dignity for the Palestinian people. And I won't repeat what Alon said, but I know that it is sincerely felt by Alon and others about what they would like to see for the future between Israelis and Palestinians. So that is unfinished work, but I know that vision is going to be very helpful in the months and the years ahead.
And I think the big challenge, how to convince everybody this is a win-win situation for everybody instead of zero-sum game. Brian Haag, Ambassador Haag, Ambassador Oshfeiz, Ambassador Shaheen, thank you very much. That was a great discussion, and we are honored to have you with us in Abu Dhabi Strategic Debate. And we would love to host you next year, not virtually, but after we get rid of this pandemic, of course, in Abu Dhabi, welcoming you between us. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ibtisam, and thanks also the INSS. Thanks.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
في كل عام يجمع ملتقى أبوظبي الاستراتيجي نخبة من خبراء تحليل السياسات من مختلف أنحاء العالم لقراءة المشهدين الدولي والإقليمي بعمق وللتنبؤ بمسارات التحولات والقضايا المهمة في العالم. وفي هذا العام وبرغم التباعد الذي فرضته جائحة كورونا، إلا أن مركز الإمارات للسياسات حرص على تنظيم ملتقى أبوظبي الاستراتيجي في نسخته السابعة في موعده عبر عقد جلسات افتراضية تحت عنوان تفكيك الواقع المعقد النظام العالمي الجديد، حيث سيناقش الملتقى عالم ما بعد الانتخابات الرئاسية الأمريكية من حيث تأثير نتائج هذه الانتخابات في النظام الدولي وفي عودة التنافس الدولي على الشرق الأوسط. ويطرح الملتقى هذا العام أيضا تفكيك شفرة الشرق الأوسط بعد معاهدة السلام الإماراتية-الإسرائيلية، وكيف ستعيد دول الخليج العربي حساباتها الجيوسياسية بعد هذه المعاهدة، كما تحتل جائحة كورونا وتداعياتها جزءاً مهماً من نقاشات ملتقى أبوظبي الاستراتيجي السابع، خصوصاً استشراف طبيعة الاقتصاد العالمي ما بعد كورونا وتأثير الجائحة في التحولات الجيوسياسية الدولية وفي الأنظمة الصحية في العالم. ملتقى أبوظبي الاستراتيجي يأتي هذا العام يحاول الإجابة عن تساؤلاتكم ومقاربة شواغلكم في هذه الفترة الحرجة التي يعيشها العالم. فأهلا وسهلا بكم.